Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy from Guardian Tax Law. I have an interesting topic today. We've got another Fed discussion that's going on right now. Decision won't be a final decision about federal rates won't be made until tomorrow. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're ahead of this, that we're dealing with, addressing these and doing the best that we can for our clients. So we're going to be talking all about interest rates and how to beat them and thrive in this economy. So stay tuned with us, and thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. But I've got a lot of news and a lot of interesting information about this topic. Welcome back, everybody. And again, thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. Got a lot of interesting stuff to cover, a lot of stuff in the news. And I'm just going to kind of dive right into it. One of the first things here is, the homeless issue is an ongoing thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is important that people still know what's going on and are paying attention to it, because this is something that's getting worse. It's it's a real thing. So in Los Angeles, they're trying to do that. So they opened up a 165 million luxury apartment for homeless people. Now, again, the homeless issue is a huge issue in the Los Angeles area. It's not just California, not just LA, though. It's something that's being seen here in Tucson and throughout the country. Why? Housing costs have gone through the roof. Inflation has hit, and it's driven a lot of people out of the housing market. We're talking about working families. There's a lot of municipalities trying to do that. So this is a 19-story building, 278 units that they're going to fill. But again, this is a drop in the bucket compared to the larger issue. And the cost here is what's mind-boggling. So it's going to cost $600,000 per apartment. So again, the amenities in the building, they're taking something that's not being used and they're changing it to help the homeless. Sounds great, but you would think there's some ways that they can do be a little more efficient with this. So again, that's the criticism. It's going to cost $165 million. Where's the money coming from? It's from this tax on high-end companies. So that's where the money's coming from, and it's going to cost about $600,000 per unit. The problem is, over the last year, seen a 9% increase in LA and 10% in the city. So you house 276 people or families, which is great. It's wonderful to do for those families, but when you have 9 to 10% increase every year, it really does feel like a drop in the bucket. Providing shelters, providing aid, but I think more than anything else, that we need to address the root causes, and that's where interest rates and inflation is really killing people and hurting people in a very real way. So I'm going to jump to this next article, which is about our favorite boogeyman, China. China, this is an interesting article from the Epoch Times. We're putting tariffs on China and Chinese goods. Why? Because they're horrible. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the Communist Party in China. They're doing everything they can to undercut our economy, undercut our manufacturing, weaken the dollar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So China is not our friend. Anybody thinks otherwise is I've got a bridge to sell you. So not only are they doing their best to undercut and weaken the United States, they're leading the Axis of Evil, the worst countries in the world: Russia, Iran, North Korea, and possibly Venezuela and Burma, all very dictatorial countries, huge, massive human rights abuses. They terrorize their own citizens and those of the neighboring countries. I mean, these are the worst actors in the world, hands down. So what it's talking about is, we're hitting them with sanctions and tariffs to address this. The problem with tariffs is it's easy, or one-time tariffs, it's easy to get around them. So this is an interesting article where it says, look, what they're doing is they're going to second tier partners, and these aren't all bad actors. Excuse me. So these are regular trading partners. Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand. Thailand is a huge partner and ally of the United States. Egypt, Malaysia, and Hungary. So by investing in these second-tier companies, they're producing these goods in Mexico. It's funded and owned by the Communist Chinese Party. But this is one of the concerns with EVs, is that Mexico is producing EVs or China's producing EVs in Mexico and then trying to flood our market. So they're not allowed into the United States at this point because they're much cheaper. But there's plenty of other issues with these Chinese EVs, but they're flooding the markets throughout the world. And even though they're not making it to U.S. markets, they're doing a lot of damage to our producers. And this is what China does: is they subsidize very, very cheap goods, flood other markets, and kill the competition across the world. So again, something to be very aware of. I think we need someone, an administration or strong president that will not only stand up to China and Russia, but take them on and not let them play these games and hurt people throughout the world. So this is an interesting article from NPR, and it's about U.S. citizens, and doesn't happen often, but it shows some of the issues in dealing with the IRS. U.S. citizens detained abroad still face tax fines. So the individual that this happened to, and this does happen, Jason Hussein, was returned to the U.S. in 2016. The Obama administration negotiated his release from Tehran or Iran. He was there for 544 days. When he came back, he got a bill from the IRS for $6,000. While you were gone, you didn't file taxes. Well, he's being held hostage in a foreign country. Come on, people. And the IRS doesn't have a good fix for this. So while time went on, his tax bill went up to $22,000 with tax penalties, interest, and all this. And he was a connected individual, or is a connected individual. He started working for a Democrat senator out of Delaware, and he said this isn't right. And he sat down, and they got a bipartisan bill that's passed the Senate to deal with this, and now it's going to the House. So let's see what happens. But again, the idea that people should have to pay taxes when they're being held hostage overseas should be a common sense fix, and so and they're saying right now currently between 40 and 60 Americans are being held unjustly overseas, and that number has increased. It's generally increased over the last decade. So again, very small number, but what do you do? How do you actually deal with the IRS when this issue comes about? And we don't have all the details about it, but I do think it's interesting that when you do have this happen, it's absolutely important to get good information, to talk to someone, and it's okay to get a second opinion. True story, yesterday I had someone call in, and they were working with somebody else and said, oh, they're not doing anything, they're having me pay all this money, and they're just going to set me up on a payment plan. And it was around a $5,000 debt, and they were getting charged $2,000 by another company. I was like, really? We don't even hire people for less than $10,000 because it makes more sense just to pay the money. And if you're going to be put on an installment agreement, pay the money in the long term, that doesn't make sense at all. So they called us, and I said, look, let me make one call. I can set up an easy installment agreement, see what we can do about abating penalties and interest. and all I'm going to ask for is give me a glowing review online. It's worth 20, 30 minutes of my time to do that. So we called the IRS. Turns out this other company was actually in the middle of an offer and compromise. So charged them $2,000 to settle. Turned out it was closer to $7,000. If they do it, great. So I told them, hold the phone here. I don't want to mess with this, and really it's in the middle of an offer and compromise. Go back to them, talk to them, communicate with them, even if you're having a hard time communicating with them. Make sure that this offer is accepted, or do what you can to make sure this is accepted. And a good professional will not undercut somebody else in the middle of what they're doing. I've had that a few times where someone came, they were impatient, or they didn't know what was going on. They didn't feel like they had good communication, but they were in the middle of an offer. They were in the middle of doing something. It's like, let that play out. They've already done their work. I don't want to go into the middle of a case and destroy an offer and make it harder. So I said, look, I'll look at some documents if you want me to, but when you get someone, don't get someone that's going to sell you. If you feel like you just stepped in a sales room and they're trying to pitch you as hard as they can to get your money, you might want go talk to somebody else. And I kind of got distracted on that, but again, this is where it's so important that I was reading this as I read this article, and as a tax attorney, I was like, this guy should have talked to me. He should have talked to someone that was a good tax professional that will help him in his situation. So I'm talking too much. We've got a lot to cover here. So we're going to jump to this one article by the New York Post. I've talked about this congestion pricing idea in New York City. It's done already in some of the biggest countries in the world, London, Dubai, or biggest cities where they have very, very bad traffic. The problem is when you tax people, of course, people just stop going. There are companies threatening to just stop deliveries to Manhattan if they charge them, $40, $50 every time they take a delivery truck into that area, or for a day or whatever. So and their complaint is, look, it's going to cause us to stop doing business with Manhattan. That's not what Manhattan wants. It's not what the New York governor wants. They were looking for a way to reduce congestion, but at the same time, get more revenue. So they suspended it. So Governor Hochul, the governor of New York, suspended the congestion pricing toll income, but they don't know for how long. They don't know if it's just until the election is over. It's called a mobility tax. The question is, when are they going to put it into practice? Because this is the concern here, is when people don't know what the government's going to do, it creates uncertainty, it creates frustration. And even if the tax doesn't go into place, as a business owner, what would you do? You would make alternative plans. And again, it can hurt the businesses in that area, people affected by even proposing these issues and talking about this. So they passed it, but it's not suspended by the governor. So now the governor's trying to figure out other ways to tax it, to raise similar funds. But as you go through the article, there's one thing that they're not considering. It's cutting spending. And as we go through this today, rising interest rates, rising inflation has everything to do with overspending. So just want to touch on a couple IRS articles real quick. What do you do if you miss the April filing deadline? File your taxes. Get squared away as soon as you can. If it's filed more than 60 days after the due date, minimum penalty is $485 or 100% of the unpaid tax, whichever is less. So you can at least get hit with the $485 penalty if it's more than 60 days due. If it's below that, you'll get, if it's below $485 If the tax is less than $405, it'll just double the amount that you owe, which is frustrating too. But if you only owe $200, it would only add another $200. It wouldn't be a $485 penalty. And then it goes up 0.5% every single month, or part of a month, until the tax is fully paid, till it reaches 25%. So this is on top of an 8% penalty if you don't pay throughout the year now. What can you do to reduce penalties and interest? This is just some of the same things. Get those penalties paid. Address that as quickly as possible. You can set up a payment plan. These are just normal things that we've talked about ad nauseum. The best thing you can do is get in there and fix the problem as soon as you can. Get your tax returns filed. Set up some kind of resolution on your balances. Don't wait. Don't delay. It only gets worse. And just a quick little reminder, we talked extensively about this yesterday. June 17th, estimated tax payment deadline next Monday. If you miss it, you're going to get hit with another 8% penalty for what was owed for the second quarter. So make sure you're having sufficient withholding. Make sure you're getting those estimated tax payments in. Just trying to get the word out because it is important. So, interestingly enough, what happened to my article? That's weird. The article I was trying to share is unresponsive right now. It's weird. So this was a deadline for expats. The deadline for expats is June 17th. And I'm going to have to skip around. The whole thing is just bogged up on me. So, and I just went through a break. So we had a break. I just talked right through it. And here's the article. So we're back from tax deadline for expats is June 17th. So if you live outside of the United States and Puerto Rico, our filing this deadline is June 17th. But what is the payment deadline? It's still April 15th to have your taxes paid in full. But you also will get hit with penalties, especially for 2024, for underpaying your taxes. So they had the same penalties before, they just increased substantially for 2024 up to 8%, and that could go up. It could go up depending on what happens with the Fed. And that, like I said, they're meeting today about this. So again, if you're living and working abroad, your 2023 taxes are, the filing deadline is June 17th, so you won't get hit with those failure to file penalties, which is 0.5, which is they kick in right away. Those are the worst penalties, but also the payment is the 0.5% unless you go into collections, and it goes up to 1%. So if you're living overseas or you know someone, June 17th, you can still get an extension in. You can file for a tax extension. Gives you an extra 4 months until October 15th. But again, you need to make sure that your payments are in. Now, this next tab, also from CNBC, we have a Fed policy meeting kicks off today, tomorrow. And people are watching that very closely. What is the Fed going to do? Is it going to cut rates? Is it going to keep them the same? Personally, I think they're going to keep them the same. But one of the big keys here, so the headline is Dow drops 200 points. I don't think it's directly connected. It's just 0.7%. So they go up, they go down, and it could be higher tomorrow. But this is probably have the biggest impact on it. The consumer price index comes out Wednesday morning. And then the Fed meeting on Wednesday afternoon. That is not an accident. So they've been looking very closely at inflation and inflationary numbers to decide, okay, can we lower interest rates? Politically, they want to do that. They want to help the economy. If you don't think the Fed is influenced by politics, I've got a bridge to sell you. So, sorry. It's supposed to be non-political, but of course it is affected by and influenced by politics. But the numbers overall have forced most of them to change their tune. They haven't been talking about rate cuts anytime soon. They've talked about maybe by the end of the year. And so let's see what happens with the CPI. A lot of the numbers that we've come out throughout the year have been not so much overturned, but flipped on its head. So there's been plenty of articles where the labor numbers aren't what they're supposed to be. Again, we had an adjustment of 780,000 jobs that were incorrectly counted. So a revisement downward of $780,000 or dollars, but jobs. That's huge. There's also articles coming out about how a lot of the jobs and job growth isn't going to normal Americans. It's going to a lot of illegal immigrants that are coming into the country. And yes, they're taking jobs. And if a lot of the job growth is going to them, that's not helping improve the overall economy. It's masking what's actually happening. Those are very low-paying jobs. Again, large corporations love cheap labor, but it hurts the average consumer, and it doesn't actually improve things. So tomorrow, well, we really won't have an answer until late Wednesday as to what's happening. So just keep an eye on that. I don't think there's going to be a change. If they do, it'll be all over the news. So if they do change it, if they increase it, which I don't think will happen either, that's going to cause interest rates to go up across the board. And I'm going to jump to another article, and this is really what you're hearing from both sides of the aisle. Long term, taxes are going to go up. There's two options. Long term, the interest rate is going to continue to climb. It's going to continue to get worse. Why? Because we have a massive debt problem in the country. So here's an opinion, and really there's two options here. Increase taxes or cut government spending. Interestingly enough, I was speaking to a couple individuals from Argentina, and we've talked about how the Argentina president came in and he's greatly criticized for having chainsaws, saying this is what I'm going to do to the national government is just take a chainsaw to it. And he's essentially done that, firing people right and left, cutting their government. And these are the news articles that I'm reading and sharing. But again, I don't live in the country. So when I have a chance to actually talk to someone there, this is my marketing team that actually lives and works in Argentina, I asked them, what do you guys think about this guy? Is he nuts? Or is he actually solving a problem? And the consensus was things were so bad that they were willing to switch and do something different. I'd been attending socialists and their tax solutions for past 40 years, and the government spending had gotten out of control. Again, if you think inflation is bad here, I mean, it's still bad here, don't get me wrong. But when you go overseas, you go down to Mexico, you go down to Argentina, a lot of countries experience 100% inflation or more. And we're facing real inflation here. It's probably 10 to 15% if you strip away all the government baloney that goes with it. It's probably closer to 10%, which is very high. So don't want to undersell what's happening in the U.S. economy. We're just not used to how bad inflation can affect the economy. So his suggestion in this article, and really there's two ways to address it: cut government spending like crazy, or increase taxes like crazy. One of the two. And we also have this time bomb coming up in less than 10 years for Social Security. If we're going to keep Social Security the way it is, we're going to have to increase taxes. Or you're going to face about a 20% cut across the board in benefits. It's going to be one of the two. What I see them doing is doing a mix. But Congress, and he's right about some of these things here, that Congress is not serious about this. So interest on the national debt will be $870 billion. It's more than what we're spending on defense. So in the entire military, we're not spending as much as we are on interest on our national debt. We have the biggest economy in the world. We have the most money, but we are doing everything wrong when it comes to finances. So just what I'm planning for today is I'm really going to look at the government, what it's doing wrong, and then talk about personally how to really improve this personally for you. So some of what is in this article I'm going to agree with wholeheartedly. Some of it, I'm going to disagree with it, but I think they have a lot of good information here. Basically, 1/3 of what we pay in income taxes goes to service our national debt. Why is that? Because our income, national income right now is around $4 trillion, probably close to a quarter, less, maybe 20%. Well, no, he says personal income taxes. So there's plenty of other revenues for the government. So he's cherry picking numbers a little bit here. But will it get worse? Absolutely. So in the past, Republicans were the deficit hawks and clamored for balanced budgets. That was usually when Democrats were in office. It was the Republicans clamoring for balanced budgets. When things flipped, Democrats would oppose everything the Republicans want to do. So both parties would kind of put the brakes on the spending for the other party. But as long as Democrats would tend to spend more than Republicans. But under Trump, spending went nuts. Now, to be fair, that was COVID. But again, we threw money at the economy, threw money at the situation. The government's starting to do it again. You would think they would have learned to stop messing with the economy, start messing with things. But the SBA is coming out with a new tranche of money, cheap money, and they're just throwing it out there. They're making it easier to get money. Where they were dealing with all the fraud from the first round, they're now doing it again. So can it help people? Yes, but is it really... is this the best way for solid economic growth? Or do we just make free money available and people just go spend money? The problem is when you just throw money out there, make more money available, billions and billions of dollars, that just adds to inflation. It creates more interest. It just drives and further fuels the problem. And nobody's talking about the government just stop spending. So a lot of what he's talking about, Republicans are not, they're a big part of the problem as well. And, again, lately especially, historically, Republicans have talked a good game, but when it comes to actual cutting spending, they usually don't. So neither party is that serious about it, and he's right about that. What that means is that we're going to have high interest rates for a really long time. So as interest rates go up due to inflation, that's going to hurt our declining credit standing, and Again, our lack of concern over our mounting deficits. It's like this is already happening. He's true. So again, everybody's watching to see what's going to happen. The Fed Chair Jerome Powell even suggested that there would be rate decreases. Not happening. All of that's faded with the wind. Now they're saying, well, you're lucky to get a single rate reduction, is his opinion. That's probably true. I agree with that. I would not expect a rate reduction. And if things continue to get worse, I think they're going to really try not to do rate increases. But if inflation and economic numbers continue to worsen, they might not have a choice. So when will Congress address this issue? They probably won't. So they'll wait until there's a major crisis where everybody pressures Congress enough and tells them they need to act, they need to do something now. But Congress does not plan ahead. The U.S. government is extremely short-sighted. There's a way to do this, but until voters start demanding accountability, and the problem, the incentives that we have is that we have all the pork. Everybody wants to feed at the trough. Everybody wants to bring the bacon home to their state, to their constituencies. But actual cutting federal spending is falls flat. There's a few people in Congress, and sometimes it's bipartisan, where people on both sides of the aisle are recognizing that, look, this needs to be done. But the establishment and parties on both sides of the aisle have no stomach for it. They want more and more money. They're continue to play the same old game they always have. So he's saying that what's going to happen is it going to be a major crisis that's going to force them to act, and that'll either be a huge spike in interest rates and inflation that the Fed will be unable to control. And he says it's going to be a huge problem. So he said that he says there's two options are few and hard to swallow. So this is where I disagree with him. But I'm taking a lot of time going to this article because this is going to carry over to you personally. So think about this. If you're paying high interest rates and you see inflation, interest getting worse and worse, which is what is expected to happen long term, especially as we continue to overspend as a country, you should be doing the same thing. Don't act like Congress. Don't do what they're the example of what not to do. We need to get a handle on things and start controlling spending sooner than anything else. So his point here is that mandatory obligations, this is a big problem. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid spending is out of control. And he's saying that the mandatory spending was $3.8 trillion out of a total budget of $6.1 trillion. Last year, we brought in $4.4 trillion of income. And that doesn't include the $1.8 billion discretionary spending, which includes the defense budget and national debt payments. So can we cut federal government spending? Absolutely. Do we need to cut federal spending? Absolutely. Do we need to have people look seriously at Medicare, Medicaid, waste, fraud, and abuse? Absolutely. There are ways to cut and cut deeply. You can go and cut so many jobs, federal jobs. We've been hiring, and that's one of the distortions in the economy is that they're still hiring people like crazy for the federal government. They're still growing the federal government. And nobody's talking about taking a chainsaw to the federal government and, like they did in Argentina, hacking and slashing and cutting back federal spending. The administrative state has been growing, and with that comes more regulatory costs, more weight on the economy. It's harder to function when you have the government looking over your shoulder all the time. Do we want some of that? Absolutely. But is it overkill? A lot of people would argue absolutely. So he says there's nowhere to really cut. Where do we cut? Reduce Social Security. He says nobody wants to do that, which is true. The last person to discuss that was George W. Bush, and he got dogpiled for it. But if he would have made those changes and people were investing in their own Social Security 30 years ago or 20 years ago, Social Security might be in a very different place today. But again, politically, he got dogpiled on by the media, by the left, and that died very quickly. So his solution is to add a value-added tax. So again, do we cut spending or do we increase taxes like crazy? Now, here's the problem. If you don't cut the size of the federal government and they continue to borrow more than they make and overspend, that is the problem. You can't stop inflation with the federal government overspending. You just can't. So he's completely missing the boat here, because really, to continue overspending, they're printing more money, they're putting more money into the economy, and so you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods or similar amount of goods. The federal government by itself does not add value and growth, real growth to the economy. It doesn't. The Keynesian talking heads are full of, they don't know what they're talking about. So again, it's just this idea that we'll just tax our way out of this is going to cause more damage in the long term. But again, the further we go down this road, we might not have a choice. So he says, let's raise revenues by taxing more. The problem is every time we get another dollar in federal revenues, they just go spend it faster than ever. And they have so many different plans and spending plans and the Inflation Reduction Act that didn't reduce inflation at all. I mean, the government is horrible at just spending more money. So the best way to deal with this, I think, is to starve the government. We're up on another break, and we'll be back shortly in a short bit. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to wrap up this article. Just want to touch base here. And so it's funny how a lot of people, they look at Europe and say, hey, look at what Europe is doing. A lot of European countries have a value-added tax. So basically it taxes any increase in value in a product and based as it goes through production. So right now, it's really the final point of sale is where we have a tax on goods, but this is really an invisible tax that. So just to kind of explain, if you have the farmer that grows the wheat, they have to pay a tax. When they sell the tax on the wheat, the purchaser has to pay 5% when they sell. So at every change in distribution, they sell the wheat to a miller. The miller grinds it up into flour, and then the miller sells the flour to a bakery, and then the bakery, so every time it's sold to someone else, you have another 5% tacked onto it. So then the bakery makes the bread, and then they sell the bread to grocery stores. And so every stage of production, you get hit with another 5% tax. Basically, it really drives taxes up. It increases the cost. If you want to talk about inflation, a value-added tax is a horrible way to go. It is a popular idea among leftists, but again, critics say it's both inflationary, which doesn't help the issue, and it's regressive in that it increases the cost of everyday goods. And that's just a simple example, a farmer to a miller, turning into flour, turning into selling that flour to a bakery. I mean, there's so many more steps within the economy. And having a 5% tax at every stage means that when you finally get to the end stage, you can be paying 25% more. That is a huge inflationary measure. It hurts low-income Americans the most. And they say, well, give them a tax credit. So then who does it hurt the most? The middle class. It hurts the average American more than anything else. Even if you try to throw in a tax credit, it's still going to drive up prices throughout the economy. So the other option is to cut spending, and so if you raise $3 trillion over the next decade, that's only $300 billion a year when we're overspending by $1.6 trillion. So again, this is still a drop in the bucket. The idea that you can tax your way out of this, I think, is ridiculous. So for third quarter of 2024, we still have 8% interest here. So then I'm going to jump to this last article here, and this is really what we're going to spend the rest of our time. 12 steps to take as Fed Reserve keeps interest rates high. And it's not, the interesting thing is they say, well, the Fed's doing this. No, the Fed is just trying to tame what's already happening in the economy, but they're using this one lever to try to counteract all the government spending that's going on. That is the real culprit. That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is that our federal government is overspending. It's done it with Republican and Democrat governors, administrations. Mitt Romney had this whole idea that we'll just stop overspending, and we'll reduce the rate of overspending until things catch up. The longer we do that, the slower we go in this will reduce overall spending, the more damage and the harder it's going to be to get caught up. Very soon, our inflation and the interest on our own debt is going to start crowding out other, what is more than defense already, but it's going to start hitting and making it so we won't be able to afford to pay Social Security and Medicare. Because our politicians don't have the political will, and the voters, nobody's talking about this, the voters don't have the political will to actually do something about this. So this is all going to be, this is a very long article. And this is from Bankrate. So again, this is all, none of this is rocket science. That's all basic good financial sense and advice. So first of all, get a snapshot of your personal finances. And every link has has a few paragraphs connected to it. So this is budget. Get an idea. Get control of what's happening. So anytime you have liquid cash, savings accounts, money markets, note what you're actually getting on these annual percentage yields. Most of them are not keeping up with inflation, especially CDs, money market accounts between 4 and 5%, depending on the money market. But if you have something where it's earning less than inflation, you're losing money. Now, lest your debt, including any outstanding balances and the APR that you're paying, and then keep track of your budget each month. This is something I am hammering on. I can't repeat it enough. If you run a business, your home is your own personal business. You should know what's coming in and out. And there are plenty of programs that will help you do that. But again, this is something Americans are not good at, is budgeting and managing our own personal finances. Step one, budget so you actually know what's going in and out. And people living outside their means and borrow to fund their expenses are going to feel the most squeezed, and it's going to come crashing down. Know what's good debt and bad debt and eliminate the latter. What are things that are good debt? These are things that are going to help build equity. Number one example here is purchasing a home. Now it's getting to the point where it's so expensive to purchase a home. Long rate, there are some people questioning if it makes sense, especially if you can get much cheaper rent. But long term, home ownership is the way to go. So, and then taking care of bad debt. What's the number one bad debt? High interest debt from credit cards. Get rid of it. Consolidate it. Do what you can. They have different ideas. Pay off lines of credit, pay off other things. You do not want to be paying interest. You want to get away from that, especially as interest rates go up. Now, if you have fixed rate debts, such as mortgage or car loans with low to mid single digit rates, don't prioritize paying them off. Focus on the credit card debt, the more expensive debt. So one of the things people ask me, and I used to always tell people, why pay off credit card debt earlier? I'm like, it used to be around 4 to 5% when interest rates were being kept artificially low. Now it's up to 8%. And that's just the interest rate. That does not include all the penalties and interest. So whenever I talk to people today, if they can pay it off, I said, hey, if you have the income, you have the assets long term, consider just paying it off. The interest rate is really high when you consider all the penalties. You could be paying more than 50% on past due taxes. It doesn't make sense. Get rid of it. For example, I have good debt. I have an SBA loan. It's around 3%. I'm never paying that thing off. I'm paying on it, and I'm going to keep that loan good, but I'm not going to accelerate paying on that. I'm making more money off of that with interest. And again, when the government gave out all this free money with 30-year mortgages, they lost money like crazy on it long term. But it's the government, so in the end, it's the taxpayers. So again, shop around for competitive borrowing rates. If you're looking at purchasing a car, credit cards, shop around. Some of the highest rates since the Great Recession in 2008 to 2014, which again, historically it's only 10 years ago, but still affecting people. If you bought high, mortgage rates are a little bit lower. You might want to consider and just keep an eye on it when they drop again, if they do drop again anytime soon. Be ready to refinance. um, and look for cheaper ways to borrow or avoid borrowing altogether. Boosting your credit score. So making sure you are not only paying your debt on time, if possible, but get rid of, and this is what I tell people all the time, if you want to pay off credit card debt, but sometimes the best time to do that isn't right away. If you have higher priority debt, like tax debt, and you go and you plunk a bunch of money down on credit card debt, you can be shooting yourself in the foot. So I just talked to someone yesterday. They had hired us in January and December. They paid off a bunch of credit card debt, and now they don't qualify for an offer in compromise. Other reasons as well, but they got some money, and instead of using it in a way that's allowable by the IRS, they paid off personal loans. Credit card debts are very, very common, and now they're going to end up paying more on their taxes. So again, this is why get a second opinion is so important. I have to go a little quicker through this. Big ticket purchases, especially if you're going to go into debt for it, not worth it. Absolutely not worth it. It can have that emergency fund, start those savings, build that up. And if again, right now, going into a recession, this is not the time to splurge on big ticket purchases and spending. Talk to your credit card issuers if the APR changes. And I love this. Have a financial plan. There are plenty of, if you don't know how to have a financial plan, there are plenty of articles. There are financial coaches out there that will help you plan for your future. Most people don't have a plan. They go in paycheck to paycheck. The important thing is let's start. Let's eliminate costs. Let's eliminate expenses and move forward. Don't let inflation keep you from saving. One of the big problems with inflation is that it eats away at savings, reduces the value of savings, but you need to have something for emergency fund. You should have something invested in case you lose your job. Now, it doesn't have to be all liquid. If you have $10,000 as an emergency fund, it should be at least in a money market. It should be readily available, but you need to talk to a financial professional. Make sure you have some, an emergency fund at your fingertips, or that you can access fairly quickly. But then the rest should be invested, and not all put in a 401k IRAs that if you touch it, it's going to really hurt you. Best savings yields. What are the best interest rates you can get? They recommend looking at online banks, and with the 5% APY is really high for a bank. Average savings yield at a normal bank is 0.57%. I've only seen 5% with money markets, so if they can have that with online banks, something to consider. And inflation isn't slowing as quickly. So inflation went up, it spiked, and now it's the rate of increase is going up, but again, it's bouncing between around 3.5, 3.6, and depending on the numbers you look at. And so, one of the reasons is that the government wants to look at PCE. They want to pick and choose which number is ideal for them in the moment. But that only presents distorted numbers. If you already have an emergency fund, now's the time to lock in a long-term CD. So get an emergency fund, put it in there, don't touch it. And then, so we'll just have a couple minutes. Recession-proofing your finances. Start putting money away, paying off interest rate. Raising interest rates are one of the number one things that's going to hurt people. So start planning for it. Reducing expenses and making sure you can cover a period of joblessness if it happens, if layoffs happen throughout the economy. Maybe think about another career or income opportunities. The more you can improve your situation. A lot of people are comfortable where they are, but when the economy goes down, sometimes you don't have a choice. And if you're ready for it, you have your resume burnished or you've been looking, That's the best way to be prepared, is to look for other opportunities, but opportunities that are stable. This is a huge one, and this is one thing that hurts people. Tune out market volatility. And I want to add to this, not just market volatility, but volatility in your own life. People get sick, something happens. A lot of people, they'll go and they'll cash out their retirements, they'll cash out their savings. You get hit with extra taxes in the process, which kind of just kills the point for investing in the first place, because a lot of this is for tax breaks. But if you take the money out early, it hurts you. And you end up having to hire someone like me to deal with the taxes. When you're investing long term in the market, you need to leave it there. You forget about it. And again, we have more bank failures here, we have more issues here. Be prepared more than ever. So again, a lot of information. I feel like I just turned a fire hose on everybody out there. But the takeaway here is the economy is volatile. Things are probably going to get worse long term because of all the overspending going on in our government. So be prepared. Start preparing now. Plan for financial success, and that's where we'd love to see people go.